Hi, and welcome to the Health Begins with Mom show. I am Dorit Palvanov, your host. On this podcast, I will share insights and interviews on health, parenting, and explore the question of what does it take to thrive as women, wives, and mothers. Now, let's get going with today's episode. Hey there, and welcome to the Health Begins with Mom podcast. I am Dorit Palvanov, your host. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a health coach for women and children and the creator of Teach Your Kids to Eat Vegetables online feeding course and the Thriving Mama Mastermind, which is a year-long membership community designed to help mothers take back control of their health, marriage, and parenting. And you can find more information about these programs on my website over at healthbeginswithmom.com. Today on the show, we are talking about ways we can support ourselves and our children with ADHD. Did you know that according to the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, approximately 11% of children ages 4 to 17, which is 6.4 million children, have been diagnosed with ADHD as of 2011, and this number continues to rise each and every year. My question is, why is this happening? Can the reason for it be hiding in our food system? Is it possible that unknowingly we parents are feeding our children with foods that are adding to the problem? So today on the show, we're going to explore that. Now, having a child with behavioral issues is really not a joke and extremely difficult and challenging. My intention behind this podcast is to expose you to a slightly different way of thinking. What if we could see our children and the challenges they bring as a spiritual growth opportunity for us? What if I was chosen to parent this child not randomly, but because I have the wisdom and answers within me that are needed to guide this child through life? How does this perspective change your attitude towards your child? How would your parenting style change as a result? How would your relationship and connection to this child look differently if you allowed yourself to stay open and be receptive to something different? Hopefully, this ignites some curiosity within you. Today on the show, I'm interviewing Nindys Grewal, who is a mother of two, a holistic nutritionist, a clinical IRAologist, and a live blood cell microscopic analyst. Prior to working in the holistic health field, Nindy worked as a teacher and currently focuses her practice on helping children with ADHD, autism, delayed learning, and behavioral issues. Her work is dedicated to empowering children, parents, and teachers to work together and help those children to thrive and succeed. Today on the show, we talk about why are more and more children struggling with attention, focus, and other behavioral disorders. What are some of the conventional treatment options available for these children today? How does Ritalin work, and how does it alter the brain chemistry? And what can mothers do to help their children by using food and nutrition as the preferred therapy method? And also we talk about which foods can parents include in order to help children with autism, and how can we support children with ADHD in the school environment. The show was packed with good stuff, especially if you are struggling with behavioral issues in your home. I hope you find great value in this. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at dorit@healthbeginswithmom.com, or you can also find me on Facebook. I go under Dorit Palvanov. All right, guys, let's jump into today's interview with Nindy. So hi, Nindy, welcome.
Hi, Dorit.
I'm
Thank you
so
for having
happy.
me.
Yeah, I'm so happy you joined me today. So, Nindy, as I understand, nutrition is your second career.
It
Can
is.
you tell us what fueled your decision to leave a paying job and a career as a teacher to being self-employed and practice nutrition instead?
Okay, so it was a bit of a long journey. I mean, I was teaching for as a primary junior school teacher, so I did that for many years, and then it was a hard decision to sort of step away from it, but it was something that I felt like I needed to do for a few reasons. Nutrition and holistic nutrition was a passion of mine for many years. In my teens and 20s, I had a lot of my own sort of digestive issues, and I just didn't feel well. But, we all sort of just get used to not feeling well, and we sort of make that our normal. And, I coped with it. I made changes, but it wasn't until I think in my late 20s and early 30s, I started to actually realize that, the more and more I was aware of the foods that I was eating and how I was taking care of my diet, as well as just, managing stress, all of those things, all in a combination, made me feel a lot better. So I continued to learn and try, to make those changes. And the other thing that really sort of fueled this for me was I have both of my parents that had many various illnesses. Nothing, again, nothing serious, but they were the types of illnesses that, like they're both diabetic. They both had many, medications that they were on, constantly going to doctors. And I just sort of looked at that and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to follow into those footsteps, because a lot of, what I knew was there was a lot of hereditary and genetic component to it. But at the same time, I also knew from the knowledge and the research I had done that there was a lot of, ways that I could prevent this type of a life for myself in the future. So the more and more I researched it, and the more I had this craving that I just wanted to learn more and do something with it and help people as well. So I did step away from teaching to go back to school and become a nutritionist. And yes, like I said, it was a bit of a hard decision, but I was lucky enough that I had a lot of support from my family and my husband. So, but what my goal is, and it still is, sort of this vision of mine, is that I would like to be able to implement all of this knowledge that I have about nutrition and how it affects not only our bodies, but how it affects our mind, and bring that into the school system to develop programs, hopefully to be able to teach the schools, as well as be able to help the children understand how important diet is and nutrition is to learning and our behavior, as well as how it affects our brain and overall health. Because, there is an epidemic of not only obese children, there's an epidemic of a higher, like double the rate of ADHD diagnosed children nowadays, autism. Everything is increasing, and there has to be a solution, and there has to be an answer to say, how can we slow this process down?
Yeah.
And that's basically what my long-term goal is, to be able to get back into the school system, maybe not as a teacher, but to teach people in a different way, teach them that there is a way that we can help these children and help the families that are always having to, struggle through this with their own children.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for being so honest with yourself and vulnerable enough to show up in the world and really doing the work that you were supposed to do and meant to do. So thank you. So before we go deeper and dive deeper, and I do want to talk to you about the statistics and the rising numbers. I'm just curious, what is it about working with children and supporting families that attract you so much?
Well, as you know, I have 2 children of my own, and I know it's a struggle every day to try to get them to eat well and to, give yourself the peace of mind to think that they're getting the right nutrients. I mean, we have all this knowledge that nowadays our soil is depleted of nutrients. So we're always worried that even our fresh foods and our organic foods are not even as good as they might have been, 100 years ago. And then on top of it, there's so much information out there. There's information about, what's good, what's not good. So people, they're overwhelmed with this information. So as far as working with children, obviously, because I have a teaching background, I have this natural instinct and passion to want to work with children. But I also, before I even went to Teachers College, used to work with children with autism. And I really got to see the other side of how the families that are, coping with not the norm, in the sense that the challenges that parents and families that have, it doesn't matter whether it's autism, or it could be any other disability, or it could be just that your teen, you might have teens that are not, being sort of rebellious. But there's always struggles in every family, and to have to deal with the ongoing struggles, as well as trying to cope with all this information that we're overwhelmed with every day, I really felt like it was necessary for there to be some support there for parents and families, as well as the childcare workers, such as the schools, as well as any other therapists that are out there. Because again, there's not a lot of focus on nutrition and how it does have a huge impact on our health, and how it can actually help to alleviate a lot of these symptoms that might be going on. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So as I was preparing for this interview, I've looked into the numbers, and I found that according to the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, approximately 11% of children ages 4 to 17, which is 6.4 million children, have been diagnosed with ADHD as of 2011, and this number continues to rise each year. So I'm curious, why are more and more children struggle with attention, focus, and other behavioral disorders? What is it in our food system, in the air that we breathe? What is it about our environment that creates that sad reality?
Well, one of the major, I think, increases that we are bombarded with every day are an excess of toxins in our environment, in our foods, in our products that we use. So we are overwhelmed and sort of just overwhelmed with the types of toxins and chemicals that our body is being exposed to on a day-to-day basis. To top it off, as I mentioned, our foods are not as nutrient dense. A lot of people are going for the quick processed foods, which are even less nutrient in value. So you're now getting more processed chemicals coming through our foods, as well as home care products, as well as just environmental toxins. So our bodies are only our liver, which is our main organ for trying to detoxify, can only handle so much, and it can it starts to become sluggish, and it starts to become overwhelmed as well. But the foods that we're eating, compared to what we used to eat many hundreds of years ago, but even as of 20-30 years ago, has changed so much that our gut bacteria, our gut biome has changed. The microflora and the actual bacteria that's our healthy bacteria that's helping us actually survive and deal with all of this excess of chemicals and bacteria and everything that's going on in the outside world. It's not allowing us to actually stay balanced. So we have an increase of I guess you can call it bad bacteria, an increase of yeast, all these other sort of pathogenic types of bacteria, as well as yeast and parasites and things like that are starting to overrule, and our good bacteria and our good microbiome is actually starting to become weaker. And that has a huge impact on our brain. So you probably heard a lot about the gut-brain sort of connection. And the reason is that our healthy bacteria is there not only to protect our intestines and try to protect it from this bad bacteria, but it also helps to regulate a lot of our neurotransmitter activity. So when you have a lot of, I guess, the wrong bacteria in our body, it starts to affect how our neurotransmitters work. So there's one specific bacteria actually that actually eats one of our neurotransmitters, GABA, which is the one neurotransmitter that helps to actually send messages to your brain to stay calm. So if that's reduced, then what happens is your brain keeps getting signals to be excited all the time. There's this excitatory sort of reaction, constant. That's the brain just doesn't know how to calm down and slow down, and that's one of the main reasons why you will see an increase in ADHD, for example. The other reason is, a lot of it is even just in general that our kids are so used to these iPads and iPods and devices and things. And again, then it's constantly sending signals to our brain to be excited. So it doesn't learn how to kind of calm down. But at the same time, it really does come back to our gut bacteria. And we need to understand that we need to increase that by eating the right types of foods. So eating fermented foods is really important, as well as having a probiotic, which can help increase the healthy bacteria in our intestines. So this is something that a lot of people don't really recognize.
Right. And talking about that, we'll get more into the details of what they can do nutritionally, but I'm just curious, just for people who maybe don't know, what are some of the conventional treatment options available for these children today?
In terms of supplements or
no like the conventional treatments that they're offered.
Right. So for nowadays, any child that's even slightly showing a lack of focus or showing a little bit of hyperactivity, right away they're diagnosed with ADHD, and they're put on drugs like Ritalin, which again, you're just creating this issue of having the child become dependent on a drug. And that many research shows us that children who are on Ritalin, which is probably 80% or 90%, I don't know what the stats are exactly, but majority of children that are being now diagnosed with ADHD are right away put on Ritalin or some type of Ritalin type drug, and it actually will show increases that child will then go on to become more dependent on other types of drugs in the future as an adult, such as cocaine, which has a very similar effect on the brain.
Wow. Or consuming sugar, which also acts as in the brain. Yes. It's interesting to see how I can tell you from my own experience. I already know 2 children who were, well, I don't want to use a very harsh language, but they were in a very they were basically kicked out of school because of these conditions, of behavioral conditions, and they had to, these families, it's unfortunate, it's very sad, these families had to find other solutions, other schooling system for these kids. But what the interesting is that I know that these families, they eat lots and lots of sugar. And so if they only knew how sugar acts in the brain, and especially, so I know, like from I remember when I went to nutrition school, we learned about, and you mentioned it earlier, I just want to sort of make it a little bit clearer. We all have, different bodies, and as we have different bodies, we have different thresholds. So some children may consume, sugar and be fine, whereas other children who, maybe genetically or for other reasons, their bodies are, they cannot handle that amount of sugar, and then that, right? And then in turn, that will sort of be demonstrated as behavioral issues. So thank you so much. And one more thing that from my research, other than medication, other than Ritalin, I know that there's also behavioral therapy that is available for families. But it's very, very expensive. Like it's I think it's much cheaper to do some nutritional changes.
Right, exactly. Yes. And I mean, that's actually, in terms of therapy, that is the number one therapy out there. There's behavior therapy, and that's what most people end up resorting to because, either they're putting their children on drugs, which many parents don't want to, but, you know, sometimes they don't have a choice as far as what the schools, you know, suggest,
Right.
or their, you know, therapists suggest. But then, you know, they also do the therapy side of it, which, you know, it is beneficial for the children, but it's not the necessarily the solution either.
Yeah. And do you know how this medication work? Like specifically, how does it alter the brain? And I don't know, how do children change? Like, what are the physical changes in those children who are medicated?
I don't know the exact sort of chemical response, because, you know, there's only so much information like my brain can. But I do know that it acts as an inhibitory. It's very much sort of a suppressor as far as trying to, you know, suppress brain activity. Very similar to what your brain inhibitors would do, but it's not a natural.
Right. So that's why, I guess that's why we hear a lot of those children as being like zombies.
Very subdued.
Yeah.
And it's not even, that's not them either, because now you're taking away their own personality. And
exactly.
So it's actually very sad that, you know, that's sort of the way to control them.
So thank you for bringing that up, because, you know, this podcast is all about empowering moms to tune into their inner wisdom and help our children from a place of connection, compassion, and accepting children as complete whole human beings. However, even though all of that sounds very good and romantic, having a child with ADD or ADHD is no joke, and it can be extremely stressful. So what can mothers do to help their children by using food and nutrition as a preferred therapy? So using, you know, using nutrition as a medicine.
Right. Okay. Well, at the end of the day, we're trying to keep it simple for moms, because already you're overwhelmed. You're trying to deal with all the other issues that come with having children that might not be, you know, behaving the way you want, or you're dealing with school issues. So we're trying to keep our nutrition simple. And at the end of the day, you want to eat as much whole foods, real foods as possible. And the more you are able to actually prepare and cook your own meals at home for your children, you can actually monitor what they are eating. The second issue is to try to get them the nutrients that their body requires, because again, coming from whole foods, you should be eating lots of fruits, vegetables, trying to get your children to eat lots of fruits and vegetables, which can be a very challenging task for many parents. So be patient, you know, trying a new vegetable maybe once a week, just incorporating it every day, introducing it until the child is actually able to recognize it and familiarize themselves with it. And even just if you allow them to take one bite, it's something that can actually eventually become a part of their daily routine, and they become accustomed to it. So be patient with the child, be patient with yourself. Don't try to make it all happen at once. But introducing those right nutrients is important. Reducing sugar is absolute, because sugar, as we already talked about, has a huge impact on our brain activity, and it also completely distorts our healthy gut bacteria, and it actually allows for bad bacteria and parasites and other yeast and all that to thrive, which causes majority of issues. Like now, kids who have, or people in general who have a lot of yeast buildup, and again, which, you know, they feeds off of sugar, feeds off of a lot of processed white, you know, flours and wheat and anything that breaks down into a simple sugar. So we're not just talking about white sugar or candy or that type of, we're talking about the types of foods that will break down into a simple sugar very quickly. Those are the types of foods you have to avoid, because they feed the yeast and all, as I said, other pathogens in the body. And those things are what's causing brain fog in the children. They cause hyperactivity in children. They are the ones that are causing their immune system to be weaker. So there's a lot of reasons to avoid sugar. You know, a lot of times if we feel like we're not able to get the right nutrients in, then I would suggest that you do try maybe a multivitamin that can help to improve their nutrient, at least to, you know, get that balance up and make sure they're getting the right nutrients. So sometimes we do need to supplement, especially with our young children. As far as a probiotic, as I mentioned before, is really important, just because that actually is going to help, again, to increase and improve your healthy gut bacteria, which can improve, just their activity. You'll notice a huge difference when they are on good bacteria, or they have increased their good bacteria in their body. So eating fermented foods is another way. So if you do have, sometimes there's not enough bacteria, it's a great way to sort of introduce new bacteria as well, but it's not, sometimes enough. So we do want to introduce fermented foods. Like if you can get your, kids to eat sauerkraut or pickles or yogurt. That's usually the number one. But again, being very wary of those foods that have high sugars. So yogurts and flavored yogurts, you want to try to be sure that you're not, feeding them a little bit of a healthy bacteria and then a lot of sugar. So
right.
Just be careful. Reading labels is really important when you're buying your foods as well. So I think that's, like I said, just trying to keep it simple and trying to eat real food. And I would suggest that if you can get your children on a healthy probiotic, that's probably what I would suggest as a number one as well.
And I also want to mention that Nindy was so kind, and she created a beautiful and very informative blog post for us. And you can find it on healthbeginswithmom.com. It's called helping children with ADHD to stay balanced. And so you can find all of this, how to balance intestinal gut flora. There is, she talks about the elimination diet and the multivitamins and probiotics and other things that you can do in terms of supplements in order to help your child to thrive. So now of course, there are many, many, many things that you can do. And of course, you do need some kind of guidance from somebody who is who's licensed to help you and who has lots of experience. I'm curious about if you can share some examples of how children who've actually went the holistic way, the natural way, and how do they respond? Like which changes do parents report to you?
Okay. Well, the first, I guess I'll give a real life example of a child that I worked with that actually has autism. But when you have autism, as many of you know, it's sort of, there's a spectrum, and there's some kids that are more severe than others. And with this particular child was getting a lot of was going through a lot of behavior issues, up and down, tantrums, and just not able to focus. So we changed his diet. We eliminated, like I mentioned, the yeast. The sugars. We eliminated gluten as well as dairy, and eliminating a lot of these high allergenic foods that the body doesn't respond well to and can't heal on very easily is important to sort of get the system back into balance. And by decreasing a lot of the foods that he was consuming on a regular, we were able to actually notice that his behavior had changed because we reduced the yeast levels in his body, and we also increased the probiotics and the healthy bacteria. But even by reducing his anger and his tantrums, we noticed that by giving him higher amounts of foods that have vitamin C and supplementing with vitamin C, which actually helps to bind, what causes high sort of anger issues is usually a higher level of copper. So what happens is if we bind, vitamin C binds to copper to actually eliminate it. So it helps to reduce the copper levels, as well as implementing zinc into the diet to help gut healing, and also again to balance out those levels of copper. We notice the anger issues and the tantrums reduce significantly. So just by making a few small changes in diet, I guess it sounds like a few small changes, but it can definitely be hard when you've got a child that will only eat, let's say, white pasta or white bread.
Right.
But I guess the key is, again, if you go to somebody who is a professional and a nutrition, like somebody who can actually, a nutritionist that can help you understand how to not only eliminate these foods, but what else to substitute it with, so that you can actually have another option for your children, that they can still eat food. So you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, now what am I going to give them? But there are a lot of other choices out there. And, if you just start making those small changes, again, the body becomes more adapted to that, as well as the children get used to it as well. So we noticed a huge difference in his overall behavior. His sleep was better. His actual performance at school became better. His focus was better. So, this takes some time. It didn't happen overnight. There was, at least a good 6-month period before we started to really notice drastic changes, but it takes time. And even the dietary changes, sometimes, there's relapses, and you have to just kind of keep at it and stick with it, but you will see the changes once you actually implement a proper nutritional program.
Right. Just like with anything that is worth the investment, or right.
Yes,
it takes
absolutely.
time and perseverance, and just stay consistent, and ask for help. Reach out to other moms who are dealing with similar issues.
Yes.
I think it's very important to stay in community and reach out for help. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So, okay. So all these things are great, and they are done at home. Mm-hmm. So how can you support the child in school? How do you support families within the school environment?
Okay. So allowing for the open communication with, so if you are working with, obviously, there's usually some teaching assistants or therapists or anything in a school environment, and obviously the teachers, by making sure that they also understand that there is, a protocol in place, in the sense that we are looking at this child as a whole. It's not just about diet. It's also about, how he's able to manage his environment. So by letting the school know that, we have him on a specific diet, as well as a lot of these children like routine. So that's one thing in schools. They tend to like the routine of school and follow those routines. But even just trying to make them cope with their environment better. So making sure that the children are, not exposed to a high amount of toxins. So talking to the schools about, trying to implement better options as far as resources and, let's say the actual, what was the word I'm looking for? But, the activities that they do, just to make sure that they're not using materials that are going to be toxic in the long run, as well as trying to ask the teachers to maybe keep an actual log of how the child's behavior is, and relaying it back to the parents to say, okay, today that, the child's behavior was like this today, or they coped well, or whatever. And then you can kind of connect the pieces to say, okay, well, his diet was like this today, or this might have been an issue, and this stress might have caused him to react the way. So the fact that if you have this open communication, you can actually also teach all of the people that are involved in the helping the child thrive, and helping this child actually get to a level where they can start to become more independent and manage their overall tasks on their own. Then you can try to actually work as a team then, if you have this open communication. So it's just about educating all the members involved. So again, like I said, talking to them, not about the fact that it's not just about the diet. Obviously diet is huge when it comes to managing behavior and stress and brain activity, but allowing that information to be communicated to the school, letting them know that this is a huge impact on their health, as well as asking them questions like, what do you find works better in the school? What do you find that he likes to do? So trying to incorporate things that the child is actually better at to improve their success, so they're also feeling involved in the process. So it's not just one sort of answer, but you have to really make sure that everybody is on the same page and everybody understands that there's so many factors that are involved. So we are not just looking at one aspect of this child's success, we're looking at all aspects. So we have to keep in mind, how do they manage stress? How do they manage relationships with other children? How do they, what kind of things do they need to help them cope with those situations? And then again, always coming back to environment and diet, and trying to reduce chemicals and toxins, because that's a huge part of why they are, feeling the way they feel.
So you mentioned some toxins in their environment. Are those things like the toys or the schooling material? Like, can you give some examples?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it could be anything, because, for example, if you're again, a lot of it is out of our control. Sometimes we can't always change our environment, because it is what it is. If you go into a school that's, let's say, 50 years old, and there's mold in the school, we don't, there's nothing that much that a parent can do about that. But
right.
At the same time, we can speak up about it. We can we can talk about to the school and say that this is likely a problem that is creating an issue with my child's behavior. Sometimes even when you have new carpets, they let off toxins as well. So making sure that maybe when the schools are getting new, if they're renovating or getting new materials like that, that they are airing out there's good ventilation in the school system, schools, to make sure that that type of toxic chemical is not being, sort of inhaled by the children on a day-to-day basis. Nowadays, majority of schools, as far as school materials, and if we're talking about things like glue and other resources like the paints, usually they are using school safe, and they're meant to be sort of less toxic. So usually that's not as much of an issue anymore. But there could be anything. Like your particular child could be very much sensitive to something that another child is not, and that's like, we could be talking about dust even. It could just be anything. So just allowing the school to understand that, what, my child has sensitivities to these things. How can we make at least his environment that he's going to spend 90% of his day in better?
Right.
Right.
So what I hear you saying is basically that as a parent, to help support your child in this environment, you basically have to work as your child advocate, basically.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, I believe that you are in control of your own health, and you are the one that is going, the only person that you can really, if you want to take care of yourself, you have to do it. And you have to take charge, and you have to become empowered to do it yourself. And obviously for our children, we have to be their advocates as well. So
right.
It's unfortunate, but the government is not always looking out to help us. So we have to really try to take that control and
right.
do what we can. I mean, as I said, we don't have control over everything, but as much as we can try to at least manage, we can, try to make those changes.
Yeah. So other than nutrition, India, I remember you in the bio, you're also certified as an IRAologist and as a live blood cell microscopic analyst. Can you share a little about that, and how it works, and how it can help children with behavioral issues?
Sure. Okay, so my iridology is more of a supplement. I use it as a quick glance into the person's health. So I'm able to, by looking at the iris and actually looking at people's eyes, so children's, adults, I can actually see what areas of your body might be compromised or weaker than others. So we can tell from looking at the eyes which tissues might be damaged, which areas might be congested. So we can see, okay, what digestive issues might be going on. Is the colon toxic? We can see all of that in the eyes. I can also tell if, there are any weaker tissues in the heart area or the lung area, or, there's a lot of little clues that we can see that are given in our eyes, which are very accurate, and we can use that just to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. But it's not a diagnostic tool. It's just more of another way to kind of get a couple more answers to say, okay, what areas do we need to focus on, and what could likely be the problem? As far as live blood microscopic analysis, it is amazing, because it gives us a live snapshot of our blood and it gives us a current picture of what is happening in our body at this time. So when you go in for a live blood testing, we take a little pinprick of your finger and take a drop of blood and put it under a microscope, and we're able to see your live blood cells, and you're able to see them because it's actually on a monitor in front of you. So you come in and we're both viewing your blood, and your blood stays alive for approximately 45 minutes. So we're viewing your red blood cells. We're seeing what your white immune cells are doing. We're able to detect if there's any sort of toxins that are building up in your blood plasma. We can see if you've got pathogens that are invading your red blood cells, stealing your nutrients from you. So things like parasites, any type of bacteria that might be forming, and as well as, if you have any deficiencies. So if we can see if there's sort of a low, let's say you've got low B12 or you've got low iron or something. And again, it always comes back to why are those deficiencies there? But we can also see if there's maybe some food allergies or some other sort of immune issues. So there's a huge, I guess, benefit to working with, or having your live blood done and then using that to work with your practitioner to use that as a diagnostic tool, or at least a tool to help you dig in a little bit deeper and get your results faster.
I love that. Because other than your pee and your poop, yes. you don't really have, you don't really know what's going on in the body. So I think these tools are phenomenal. Like I'm so glad to see more and more people using those.
It's amazing. And honestly, people don't realize that, parasites are everywhere in our environment. We pick them up from, food, we pick them up from traveling, we get them like pretty much everywhere. They're in our environment. But what happens is when your immune system is compromised, again, going back to our gut bacteria, if our immune system is compromised, if we are not able to get rid of these pathogens from our body easily, they overtake our body, and that's when disease starts, and we need to get them out. And again, we're going back to generations ago where things like parasite cleanses were routine sort of things, once, twice, maybe 3 times a year that our grandmothers and great grandmothers were probably giving to children, through natural herbs or different, I don't know, concoctions. I don't know what was being used in different parts of the world. They had different types of ways of kind of cleansing the body. But nowadays we don't really focus on that. And unfortunately, it's, if you have already sort of this unhealthy gut bacteria and your immune system is compromised, this is a great, and you're eating a lot of sugar and processed foods, these external sort of parasites and bacteria and whatever is growing, they're loving it because they just they're thriving in your body, and that's really what's making you feel. And different people have different symptoms because of it. Some people don't have any symptoms, some people don't even realize it. Other people notice right away digestive issues, you might have skin issues, you might have hair falling out, it could be anything, aches and pains. So there's different things that are manifested when you've got other creatures in your body that are taking your nutrients from you.
And I also love this method of healing yourself, the holistic method, because as opposed to the conventional way, we that tend to treat the symptom. So if you have hair falling out, they'll give you a cream.
That's right.
Or if you have a rash on your skin, they'll give you a skin cream.
That's right.
But this method of healing, actually from the inside out, you're able to heal your body like 100%. And sometimes I think if your symptom would be a rash on the skin, or even some hair falling out, or even if you're moody, by changing these, the food that you eat, you're able to completely heal other things that you didn't even know have anything to do with.
Yeah, I think it's so true, because some people just, I think they just feel, oh, it's just genetic, or it's, I can't do anything about it. Or yes, the doctor gives a cream and my cream is working, but it's not getting rid of the problem. You don't want to keep putting this medication on your skin forever. You want to get rid of the problem. So what's causing it? We want to dig down deep into finding out what is the root problem, and address that, as well as trying to fix it on a natural level.
Right.
So.
Okay, so Nindys, thank you so much. I mean, I could talk to you on and on and on for hours.
I know there's always so much more to say, and I'm sure that I probably missed lots as well.
Yeah. But that's why I wanted to mention the blog post that you have created. Yes. Again, as we talked about it earlier. So it's on my website, healthbeginswithmom.com, how to support children with ADHD. And also, you've created a free download for parents, for moms. It's called Detox Recipes to Help Balance the Gut and Brain. So I love that because, all of what we've talked about mostly is theory. And I really like to go and be practical and give practical advice to parents. So these recipes are delicious. They sound delicious, and I'm sure they taste delicious. So
they do.
if you are struggling with any behavioral issues, please give them some, try them out, try the recipes. And before I let you go, can you tell people where they can find you and learn more about your services and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm currently working actually out of 2 clinics. I work at Lakeside Natural Health Center in Port Credit. So there I am a holistic nutritionist, and also I practice live blood microscopic analyst. So if you are looking to ever get your live blood checked, I can check that, and then I can also give you some nutritional advice at the same time. So it's a 2-in-1. I also work as the in-house nutritionist, holistic nutritionist at Balance Point Health Center in Oakville. But you can also go to my website, which is www.balancenrg.com, to learn a little bit more about myself. And I've got some blog posts and other, I think, recipes up there that you can always take a look at if you want to get some more help with any other questions that you might have about your health and trying to get back on the path of finding balance in your life.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I have a little note for parents. So as I mentioned earlier, having a child with behavioral issues is really, really not a joke, and extremely difficult and challenging. And my intention behind this podcast is to expose you to a slightly different way of thinking. What if we could see our children and the challenges they bring as a spiritual growth opportunity for us? What if I was chosen to parent this child, not randomly, but because I have the wisdom and answers within me that are needed to guide this child through life? How does this perspective change your attitude towards your child? How would your parenting style change? How would your relationship and connection to this child look differently if you allow yourself to stay open and receptive to something different? Hopefully this ignites some curiosity within you. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Nindy. And I'll catch you up next time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Health Begins with Mom show. I love hearing from you, so please post your comments and questions over at healthbeginswithmom.com/podcast. If you love the show, please share it on social media and in your real life with other moms who might enjoy this content. And if you have a burning question or topic you'd like me to hit on the show, just drop me a line at dorit@healthbeginswithmom.com. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Much love and many blessings.